People who quit without notice. What straw broke the camel's back? U/Corndread85, my dad had cancer stage 4 lymphoma. We couldn't have our phones on the floor unless we filled out some paperwork with HR for emergencies. Asked my supervisor for the paperwork and he said, "Don't worry about it." Well, when his boss visited he saw my phone and asked me about it, so I told the truth. My supervisor was pissed. A couple of weeks later I get called into the HR office. My sister called to tell me my dad died. Supervisor wasn't there but I left early. I took my bereavement and came back to work. My work bestie pulled me aside to tell me supervisor accused me of lying about my dad having cancer and dying to the entire team while I was gone. I hugged her and just left. ETA, this was 13 years ago almost. I was 20 and was out on my own for the first time in my life. He was probably 40-ish and very big and fat. No way I could have decked him, but wherever he is, fuck you Casey. A scruffy hamster. I was security at a mine in my early 20s. A couple friends of mine worked for the mine but were welders. Found out at 5 a.m. check-in that they were killed by a drunk driver the night before. I had to walk to my car and just broke down. My manager saw me walk to the car and get in and started yelling at me and ripped open my door. I told him I needed some time. He screamed that I was just being lazy. I turned to step out of my car and had gotten my arm and leg out when he started slamming my car door on me. I got my other leg out and kicked my door out at him hard and knocked him over, got out and screamed at him. I don't remember what I said, but I remember getting in my car. Driving home, took off my uniform, washed it and my spares and drove back. When I walked into the entrance building he was there and had this smug look on his face, and I looked at him, told him to go fuck himself and then threw my trash bag filled with a week's worth of uniforms at his face. Never looked back. He was later fired after the investigation. They had him on camera assaulting me with my own car door. I received an apology from the company and the regional manager offered me a job on the spot. I took it. U/pickle standard. I was a shift lead in a kitchen where none of the management knew anything about bow. I ran grill, sauté, expo, and oven solo during every peak shift. I ordered trucks, prepped all week for weekend brunch, wrote kitchen schedules, coordinated kitchen cleaning projects, contacted vendors for repairs, and generally ran the kitchens day to day. I was given the keys and started opening 6 days a week. I was working 55 hours and loving it. I expanded our brunch service to Fridays as well as Saturday/Sunday, and I come up with an early week menu to use up leftover brunch items and minimize waste. I helped grow weekly sales from 40-45K to 75-80K in 3 years. I started having issues with closing management on shifts where I wasn't there. I'd get in at 6 a.m. to open and the restaurant was left a mess and prep/stocking wasn't completed. I talked to the staff and tried to get them to help out, but I had no support and follow through from the actual managers. This went on for weeks. Then one week I was in at 5 for Friday brunch prep. I was prepping sheets of bacon and went to the back to pull the biscuits I had prepped the day before. I had left them on a speed rack. I found them on a shelf stacked on top of each other. The weight of the trays had smashed every biscuit into single sheets of dough on the lower trays. The speed rack had the dressings and cold items from the line closed the night before. I did about 90% of the brunch prep by the time the opening manager showed up at 8:30, we opened at 9. I told her what was left to set up the line. She asked why I was telling her. I laid the sheets of dough in front of her, dropped my keys on top, and walked out. I got nearly 50 calls from them that day and dozens of texts. I didn't respond to a single one. A few days later, the owner of the store called me and asked who he needed to fire to bring me back. I told him I'd pass and ended up finding another job in a day. A little over a year later, this restaurant shut down and was demolished to turn the space into a parking garage. U/overnight siren, heard my boss talking about my mom, who did not work for the company, on the phone to HR, while at work. She said my mom was a nut job and went on to lie about how she had plans to replace me for the last few weeks. She was deeply paranoid, and earlier that week she'd gotten wind that I was looking for a second job closer to home, which caused us to have a long talk where I kept having to reassure her I had no plans to quit, but just her assuming I would quit had made her turn on me like that after 6 years of working together, including multiple major work events, like CVID. So somehow she went from begging me not to leave, to the next day telling HR she had plans to fire me for weeks. But it was what she said about my mom during that same call that broke the camel's back. My mom was in deep grieving at the time, having found her boyfriend dead on the floor on her birthday, and I had confided in my boss that I was spending a lot of energy trying to help my mom and that it was causing me stress. As soon as I heard her say that, I packed up my desk, walked over to HR and told them everything I'd heard, and quit when they said they didn't have any other positions open elsewhere in the company, and said they wouldn't take action against my boss. Holly fucklety flash, when they took my elderly coworker in the back and unceremoniously fired him. He had a disability when he was hired, but after a few years a new manager started tasking him with things he wasn't able to do, then complained to the new owners. I walked out with him. I have a lot of pride for that decision. He said it made him feel like he mattered. They went out of business 6 months later, so who even cares? It's been 7 years and it still makes me angry to think about that day and those smug heartless managers. _the_bill_brasky_, they DQ'd me from a job that I literally created from the bottom up, a position made explicitly for me, over a bullshit complaint, and were gonna send me to an overnight shift packing boxes for 15% less money. Interviewed closer to home and for 30% more the next week, quit the literal day after I burned up all my vacation hours without notice. Biggest smile of my fucking life. Then I learn their big fancy auditor comes in 3 months after I'm gone and finds out I actually did a lot to save the company money and keep them in compliance with OSHA. Oddly enough, they're about 80-some days behind on a lot of stuff. They're hiring for my vacancy right now, FM. /Octopornopus, I was promoted from backroom to entertainment specialist at Target. It came with a raise to $10.25 per hour. It was great. Then the electronics specialist quit, and I took over his duties, as well as my own. Okay, that's cool. Then we were short-handed on floor staff, so I also had toys, sporting goods, auto, travel, HEPA, and baby hardlines. Setting end caps, doing price changes, clearance, pulling in stocking. On top of my actual job, which on Tuesdays, street date, was super fun, moving every movie/CD/book one spot towards the back. Then came the Xbox 360/PS3/relaunches. And digital TV. After a couple years of working 60 hours a week, I thought I should apply for an open team lead position. Surely I had proven my work ethic was second to none. I had more red cards than anyone else in the district. I had been recognized as a top seller of electronics in our region. I was told I wasn't qualified because I didn't have a degree. I said fuck it and walked. Left them with no one to cover the back half of the store. I heard it was a shit show for a while after. Problem was, that was mid-2008. I wasn't big on the news at the time, and didn't realize we were in the midst of the Great Recession. I assumed I'd walk out and just find another job paying more. That was a rough wake-up call. Making rent the next few months was tough. I picked up random jobs, and scoured CL listings all night. People always asked why I stayed at my last job for 14 years, I think it was the PTSD of my last career change keeping me in a stable position. U/NE0 Rematrix, started training a new employee. He beat the shit out of me and put me in the hospital. I was a teenager at the time. He got the job a day out of jail. His words were, "I don't take order from some dumb kid." Then he punched me in the head. I woke up in the hospital with broken ribs, a broken leg, 3 fingers broken on left hand, 1 on the right hand. I had various other injuries from after he knocked me out. My employer called me asking me if I was going to be late in the morning. I told them I was in the hospital with a broken leg. They said I had crutches, right? Be there at 7 a.m. I told him no, I quit. I hung up and blocked his contact. Got a bunch of nasty pages from him before I changed the number. I showed the cops the messages and gave them access to VM. They told me it was best if I never went back there. I never did. I ended up getting a nice check in the mail from the company for how badly things went. Took years to figure out. As far as I know, the guy was never caught. Just fled on foot cursing about that kid that ruined his life. I imagine there is some angry guy out there thinking about how he was going to get me. I am not worried. It has been over 30 years.